Well, good morning, folks, and welcome back to AC's Make and Repair. Well, today on the channel, we're going to be making some sides, some timber sides for this old pocket knife. Now, I suspect it had tin sides, like on this pocket knife here, which were held in place by means of little tabs, which are very hard to see with my camera. Hang on, see if I can get the light to shine on it in such a way. Just here, there's little tabs, just here, and this end too. See, there's a tab just there. I'll put a photo in insert. And those little tabs fold around these little spots here. There you go. Them little spots there on the, and they fold in, and that's what held the tin sides on. They're little pressed tin sides. Now this is a Richards, made in Sheffield, England. Now the blade has been worn and probably snapped at one point in time. I could have even done that as a child. But it would have usually gone down to about there and hidden behind that tin. However, it's still a good blade, it's still good functionality. The spring is still good in it, and it works well. And the steel, I suspect, is good black steel, so that's great. Good hard carbon steel. So today we're going to make some sides for it. This is my work pocket knife that I use all the time for work. I think is an old Boker, I think. And it had no sides, so I made new sides for it, and which function very well. I think it's a Boker, I can't tell. Look at it, it's that dirty. Anyhow, it's a two-blader, and it's quite good knife. I put some hardwood sides on it. I did make a little splinter probe. As you can see, the little splinter probe that goes in the side with a little knob on the end, and it just is facilitated in by like a little bit of a groove, and your fingernail just pulls it out. No, I don't think I've lost one, maybe lost one, but I make them out of old screws, these hard steel screws, and also on the other side I have some little tweezers. If you can see that, some little tweezers. Swiss Army knives used to have a similar thing, but it was quite commonplace years ago, and I just silver soldered them together at the end here, and they go on the side there, facilitated by a little groove underneath the side too. I don't know if I'll make a splinter probe and tweezers for this one. I don't know, because there's that little bit of a lump there. I may. I'll think about that as I do it. What I'll make the tweezers out of, if you're wondering, this is actually a piece of a bristle off a street sweeper broom. So the street sweepers that go around your town or city, they have bristles, and these are flat bristles. So they're about 1/8 of an inch by, I don't know how thick. So they're probably about 3.5 millimeters by about, well, not even a millimeter, I don't think. They're probably about 0.8 of a millimeter. But they're soft enough to, you can actually bend it a little bit if you try hard. But they have spring in them. And that's hence why they use this street sweeper bristles. They spring a bit, as you can see. But they make these little tweezers ideally. And if you've bought tweezers, you'll find that most of the tweezers you buy are absolutely hopeless. So if we do make tweezers, it'll be out of this stuff. So let's get into it, and I'll show you how I did this today. Today I'm probably going to be using, I was sort of tossing up between these two, but then I came across some old tulip oak, not African tulip, this is tulip oak. Now, I know it's tulip oak because in the state where I live in Australia, Queensland, they used to use a lot of this on floorboards, and if you look at this grain, it's very distinct as a grain, tulip oak, and it's a fairly hard timber. This wasn't on a floorboard, this was on actually an old sort of leg that was on an old bandsaw stand that I had given to me about a year or two ago, and the legs weren't really functional, so I took the legs off and I kept the timber because I noticed it had some nice grain on the sides, as you can see there. I'm trying to get the light on it for you. There you go, some nice grain, and it's more than hard enough to do the sides and sit in your pocket and take some hammering from some coins, etc. So let's get into it. I'll show you how we did this today, and I'll try to be as clear as I can about it. Alright, stage 2. I've cut the sides. What I went ahead and did, just shift out of the road son. What I went ahead and did then is I made a pattern. Now, while I was making a pattern, I took opportunity. These were sitting up proud a little bit, these little pieces on the side here. I took the opportunity to flatten them down. Because I am going to think about putting some tweezers and a splinter probe in this one. And so, but also, ideally you don't want that sitting up above the sides. So I made the side sit up a little bit proud of the tin part to cover the blade. I don't know if you can see there. I'll try to get it up close so you can see. That's the side, and see the blade sits up above, but the side just covers the point of the blade so it won't hook on anything. But the grab point's still available. You can still get your finger into the grab point. Yeah, once I've done the side, even if it doesn't look right, I can still take it back level with the tin part of the side there. It's not a problem. So I'll cut the pattern out. I've labelled the back and I've labelled the blade side. That way I can orientate the grain on my timber so it looks nicest. If you're just doing a knife for the practical sake of it, it doesn't even have to be a flash looking piece of timber. I'm just doing one to make it look a bit leery, you know. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead now and cut the two pieces out. Now on some knives you'll have a rivet that goes all the way through, a pin that goes all the way through and sticks out, say 1/8 of an inch either side. And I'll actually show you a knife like that. Hang on. Okay, so this knife here, I don't know if you can see, I'll get something as a background so you can see how the rivets sit outside on it. So what I do when it comes to a situation like that, see this knife's fairly well worn, the blade's set up really high. It could be repaired, there's no problem there. One blade's actually okay. That blade's okay, this one's really worn and got a chip off the end of it. It could be repaired, new sides could be done for it, no worries at all. And I possibly will get around to doing it one day. But like I said, if it's got these pins sitting out like that, you know, get your pliers and squeeze the bird over piece flat again, if you can. And then when you put your side on, you line it up, and you actually line it up where it's got to go. Push down hard. You'd have to take off that loop. In this case, not all have got that loop. And push it down hard and mark the orientation of the holes. Then just go through and drill them holes in position. Because what I do is I 2-pack them on with some good quality 2-pack glue. Look, even some of your 5-minute stuff, I've used 5-minute 2-pack glue, and it seems to have lasted. You know, if you put it on there and don't work it for 5 or 10 minutes, you can still shape it after, say, 5 or 10 minutes and then let it cure overnight or whatever, and you will still have a pretty good, a strong side. I've actually done that before, and look, I've had good success. Some, you know, if you don't clean this up properly and give this a good shine back to a good gluing point, you know, you might have to rough that up a little bit. And even the insides of your timber, you know, don't leave it glossy and smooth and glazed. Just rough it up with a bit of coarser sandpaper, not too coarse. And then when you glue it, it's got good keying to the sides. So I'm going to mark out the sides now on the timber. I'll try to match them as good as I can. But I'm going to pick out the best pieces of grain that look nice on the sides. And I'll mark it out now. And I'll also probably mark out a groove to where I'm going to put my tweezers and my splinter probe, because I have to actually chisel that in now too, that that little trench to carry them in it. Alright, let's do that now. Okay, so I've got my two pieces of timber, and what I've done is I orientated to the smooth plane sides out, so I've given that a bit of a plane on that side and a bit of a plane on that side. And I'm going to mark them as a pigeon pair. Of course, this little template that I'm using is just a piece of fairly hard sort of cardboard. It was actually a little cardboard tomato thing from the supermarket. Okay, so there you go. There are our two outsides. When we cut them, they will actually sit up that way on our knife. So I'm going to go through and cut them out now. I'll cut off the excess and I'll cut as close as I can to that line without crossing that line. Now you could cut that with a bandsaw, you can cut that with a jigsaw, you could cut that with a coping saw, you can cut that with a scroll saw. Okay, so before I do any trenching on the back of those and put that groove in for the tweezers and that, I'm just going to sand the back of these. And that's pretty good. Right. Then what I'm going to do is turn them over and I'm going to mark. Well, before I even mark it, I'll put this on it and I'm going to push down on it and just mark with the rivet saw, because I will have to allow a bit for I'll have to cut a little dimple just to go around those rivet heads, as you can understand. So what I'll do is I'll put it on there, get it roughly centralised like that. I might just get a little block of wood. There you go. That one moved. Hold that in position again. Nothing like it when stuff moves, is it, eh? Determined to move on me. So what I'll do is when I clamp it down, that will be in that position. That sort of marks it where it's going to go. But not only that, what it does for me, it gives me the position of the rivets, so I dodge them when I'm putting my groove for the tweezers, etc. So I know that the mark actually for that one's not that crash hot, so I'm going to have to do a little bit more. So there's our mark for that one. So the top rivet's about there, this one's about there, that one's about there. So what I'll do is I'll come in and I'll make a groove to facilitate my tweezers. Now I'll make my tweezers similar size to this one that I was telling you about that I use every day. So let's say I'll go a little bit deeper because over time dirt gets in them, in the groove, and you want a little bit of, so I'm just going to use this as a marker. Alright, so now it's just a matter of what I'll do is I'll score along the edge of these lines with a carving knife. If you haven't seen the video, I show you how to make these carving knives. I've got four different styles that I've made, homemade, and they really work well. But they're good for this sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'll just score down either side, cut a groove down either side, like so. That just gives somewhere for my chisel to be guided. I moved a bit, I can fix that though. Bear in mind this is on the inside, you don't see this, but nevertheless you still do it as good as you can. So I've got a little chisel which I just do this with now. I just pare away, and literally it takes no time at all. It's not the safest thing to do is push against yourself, so I'll just hold it to Timothy. And you just literally create a little trench, like so. And you have to create it deep enough. I'm not going to put my finger there. We've already got a blood blister from that belt before that piece of wood. Okay, so these are the two sides. Now what I've gone through and done after I've cut the grooves is I've just got the countersink and where them rivets where I've just done a little dimple. Now that's way out of the road of the edge and all that, so it's not really a problem. So that gives you a bit of a close-up of what they look like, and they work fine for what they are. So we're going to just clean up the sides of this now. I'll just probably get a little bit of sandpaper actually, and just give it a bit of a rough up, just like this, shine it up a bit. Anyhow, I'll give that a bit of a clean up, and then we'll go and glue it. Here I'm removing excess glue from the knife blade slot that's squeezed down on the side. Also, I'll clean up the grooves that I chiselled where the splinter probe and the tweezers go. I used a little bit of fine wire to just hook out as much of the excess glue as I can. You try to keep it back from the edge of that if you can, but you have to get as much as you can out, or else it can pretty well lock the blade up if you don't do it properly and get it out. I keep continually moving that blade actually during the time it initially takes to dry out. And I actually, towards the end where it's about to dry, I also put a little bit of WD on the blade hinge so it doesn't seize up and doesn't stick. I cut some small pieces of that street sweeper blade, the length of the tweezers I needed. I apply a bit of flux to the end of one after I've cleaned them up shiny bright, and I apply this to both surfaces of those pieces of metal. And then I subsequently clamp them together, and I silver solder the little handle end, the part that opposite to the opening end of the tweezers. I silver solder that with a little blob of silver solder that acts as a little pulling handle to get it out of the handle of the pocket knife too. And so I'm just wiping excess flux off there now, because you don't need tons of it, but you need enough just to clean it up and to make the silver solder run. Here I'm clamping them together with a pair of vice grips. Once I get them in line, I'll clamp them together. So I've got it in position now to silver solder. I'm only using a gentle flame. It's only a really light ALP or butane flame, only about an inch and a half, inch and a quarter long at the most. Very fine flame, and I hit it up cherry red. Once it's cherry red, you can apply the silver solder. It will melt the silver solder and run it in between the two pieces of metal. And I also allow a little bit of a blob to form. Like I said, that facilitates a little thumbnail grip to actually grab it out of the handles with too. You can see it's getting nice and red there now. I want it fairly red before I even put the silver solder on it, and it will run once it's hot enough. It's running nicely there now. Now I'm applying a blob. Now I'll actually build the blob up a bit. As you can see, I'm dabbing it as I go. And I just keep dabbing it until I believe the blob's big enough to protrude level with the wooden part of the handle. I actually do the same process on a piece of this street sweeper blade, a single piece of it, to make the splinter probe. I changed my mind. I didn't use the screw. I've actually used this before for splinter probes too, and I forgot about it, and then I remembered as I was doing this that I'd actually used it, so I actually make the probe out of a piece of this too, and it actually works more than well. I then go over and give the back edge of that a bit of a, the side's actually a little bit of a flushness, so I sand the side of that blob while I got in the vice grips, and I turned over to the other side, and also give the back end of the handle part of it, the knob part of the tweezers, a little bit of a curve. Now I'm bending the blade slightly, as you can see. Just put a slight bend in it. This opens the jaws, and I bend the mouth of the jaws back down together, as you can see there now. Once I've done that, I actually go back to the belt lanisher there, and I actually sand the edge of that mouth nice and flush, and that creates a beautiful, clean, tight pinching edge. And these tweezers work really well. My wife reckons I make the best tweezers going, even compared to bought ones, she said, because none of them grip nice and close or tight, but these really do. And as for pulling splinters out, look, I'm always getting some sort of splinter or something at work, and I use the probe and these tweezers all the time. You know, as you know, some of you know, I do tree lopping for a living, and I'm always getting something stuck in me. Now I'm going on to cleaning up and test fitting the tweezers to the handle as well. So here I'm just sanding it back, cleaning them up nice and neat, getting the excess silver solder off, just making them nice and tidy and smooth so they'll slip into the groove nice and good. You'll see me clean the groove out on the handle as well. Okay, this is where I'm cleaning the groove out. I'm using a piece of that blade, that street sweeper blade, just sharpened into a chisel point just to clean off any excess glue for the fuller depths of the hole both sides. So I clean it out, and I clean it out cleanly so it doesn't hinder the tweezer blade or the splinter blade from going in. So I just run this in and out quite a number of times, just enough to clean it right up, and I tap it like that and heaps of rubbish comes out. Now before I finish fitting the tweezers, I'm going to actually sand the two sides flush and equal. So I go through now and I sand it all up and get it, the ends nice and curved and the sides nice and flush and so forth. Rightio, as you can see, I've given it a bit of a rough sand on this sander as well as the belt sander, and taken it back to the back of the spine. There's a bit of hand sanding to do. That's how I get the corners rounded. I hand sand the corners, unless you've got somewhere running a router over them, which I haven't. It's very fine corner to do it with, so I don't route them at all. I just hand sand them usually. I have got a little router bit out there at the moment, but I doubt if I'd do it. Either way, you'd have to do the corners here by hand anyhow. But I will have a look at that. I know some of your Dremels and that do small router bits. Just one thing I might clarify. When this is gluing, you do get a bit of glue in these grooves that you've done. So what I tend to do is I get a little bit of cardboard or wire. This is a bit of wire. I shove it down the hole when it's wet, the glue, and I scrape it out like this as much as I can get out. Okay, so I get as much as I can out, and then I've got this little bit of leftover steel. I get it down there and I just scrape it out. Got a chisel point on it. You can actually scrape it out quite good. Sometimes you might need to get a drill bit down and then just clean it out. Use an undersized bit. It actually grabs all the leftover glue sometimes quite good. But I find this does a good job. Keeps it nice and square too. And so forth. Okay, so some of you might be asking too, where do I get this from? Well, I've got a whole bundle of this stuff. And the reason being is, like I said, they're off a street sweeper brush. And as a street sweeper goes along and the bristles go around, they actually, through fatigue, they actually break off. And in my town here and other towns I've been in, there's other cities, I've seen these lying on the edge of the road where the street sweeper's been, or in the gutter where the street sweeper's been. And they're just going to waste. You're actually doing the society a favour probably by picking them up and getting the rubbish off the street. You know, you don't want them going into somebody's tyre, but not that I think they'd do that because they're fairly flat. But, you know, that's where I get them from. So I've cut that groove. As you can see, that's put in quite good. The shoulder's there like that. Hang on, I'll just get a bit more light on the subject here. There we go. Sorry about that. There we go. And all I have to do now is I can put a mark here now, see, either side of that. And I'm just going to recess that in about that distance. So you just do it enough to get your fingernail behind it. I will cut either side of that with a little saw I've got. And then slowly just cut it out. Won't be too hard on it. And just take your time. I find these little saws with these little tiny blades on them quite good for this sort of stuff. So just a matter of getting it down there beside the mark. Don't go over the mark, always go inside the mark. And cut either side. I'll just get a bit more light so I can see what I'm doing. You can see my mark. It's very hard to see my mark. Didn't mark it good enough. Right, let's put it back in there again. And where do I put my pencil down? I tell you, it's all happening in and out. I'll just scratch it, then won't we? Yeah, you can see the scratch quite good. Right. Take the tweezers out. Get the saw. Yep. I'll see if I can zoom in a bit closer. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm lining that up with my mark. Inside the mark actually. Because I don't want it to be over wide. I want it just a nice fit. I'll cut that down. And I'll just get that chisel I got before, chisel out away, just pare it away just gently. And I'll just keep paring away at that until I get it so this part here is housed right. Sorry, this part here, I'll show you. That part there goes in there and just is housed right in, so that's flush at the back. But just so you can nick your fingernail behind it and pull it out, see? I make them a firm fit. The spring itself keeps it firm, but over time they do get a little bit looser. And it's not really an issue. If they get looser, just stretch them apart a bit, you know? And that just generally does the job. And that, look, they don't come out easily because they're below the surface. Your fingernail is actually what gets them out. Sorry about that. See? Now I'm going on to make the splinter probe. As you can see, I've curled the end of the piece of this sweet sweeper blade, and I I heated that up cherry red just to curl that like that. I do go on, after I put flux on it, to fill that up with silver solder. That little curve holds the silver solder weld. That acts as the knob or the pull part for the splinter probe. So I heat that up nice and cherry red, and then I just let the silver solder run into that little curve, and just fill that little curve up, as you'll see in a minute. And I can actually grind that back and shape that back to suit for the knob part of that splinter probe. As you can see, it's filling it up and pooling nice and well there. There you go, nice little blob of silver solder hooked in there. Got a bit of fabric on it. I'll just have to grind a nice end on that now, and I'll use a manisher to do that. Right, we're going to just shape this splinter probe now. I just want a nice long slender point. I managed to get a very nice sharp point on this. It's very hard to focus in on something so fine actually, but it is a very sharp point. It works well. I checked it out and it's a very sharp point. Now it's just a matter of fitting the probe. I've got it in the slot there. I actually curved the probe a slight bit too. That holds tension so it doesn't slide in and out too easy. I mark it the same way as I marked the other one. Sorry, I went out of frame there. And I, with the probe, I just use the carving knife there just to mark it, and I cut it out like I did before and fit the knob end in there. Right, and now we're going to get on to just rounding the corners on the sides. I'm going to go through a carving knife first and just round these corners over just gently, and just to make them a bit smoother. And then I will go in and we'll sand with some paper and go down our grits and that, just to finish it. Okay, here I'm applying some, actually it's, believe it or not, it's chest rub, like your vapor rub that you use. I actually find it quite good on stuff like this because it's full of a lot of natural timber oils, and I actually find it preserves the timber quite good, and not only that, puts a nice sheen on it too. That's what I'm using. So if you wonder what I was using there to do this with, it's a vapor rub or a chest rub type of product, and it works quite well on timber because, like I said, it's full of beautiful timber oils. And I give that a good rub all over, rub it on the blade too, it preserves the blade too, and there you have it. And you can see here those tweezers and the splitter probe are facilitated in there too. Rightio, it was great to have you along today as I made the new sides for this little old pocket knife today. Also made the tweezers and the splitter probe there too. So I really appreciate you coming along with me. Maybe it'll encourage some of you people out there to go and get that old pocket knife that you got lying in the shed or in a drawer somewhere with a side missing, or a plastic side that's all buckled and messed up. Might encourage you to go and get that out and put some nice good looking timber on the side of it. You might even want to try having a go at making the tweezers or the splitter probe. They're not that easy to do, but they are fairly easy to do. I shouldn't say they're not that easy to do. They are easy if you sort of had experience with silver soldering a little bit. It does help a little bit, but silver soldering is not that hard to do, and they do come up all right. So look, if you liked the video, please hit the like button. I really would like that if you could do that for me, please. If you're anything like me, you forget to do that when you watch a video. Anyhow, until next time, bye for now. Okay, for those that are interested, to sort of give you a quick overview of how the garden's going again. Just tomatoes. Oh, I don't know how many we've got, but I've got some wires set up there and there. All the way along. So we've got a big row of them, about 28 metres or something of those. Some carrots. Just some bare rows that we haven't got planted out yet. A heap of small beetroot there. Some bigger ones there. Some radish there. This is a row of onions. It's probably about an 8 to 10 metre row of onions. Where I've got a whole row of broccoli and cauliflower there. Got some sugarloaf cabbages here in different stages. And some other stuff down here. I don't know what this is. It looks similar. It might even be some more cauliflower or broccoli. Yeah, got some potatoes coming through. Just only young. Probably did them a bit late. Some eggplant there. Some beans. Heaps of dwarf beans. More up there, all the way up there. There's a whole row of capsicum, probably about, probably 11 metres, 12 metres there, probably at least. There's some lettuces. And zucchini, well there's a cucumber there. There's zucchini here. They're doing pretty good at the moment. Got quite a few of them already. Then you've got silver beet. There, they actually took a heap of the outside leaves off this morning and having a lot of that for tea. Some silver beet pie. Some spinach down there. And some more lettuces here. Alright, so overall the tomatoes are over there and this is the whole area. And get some little things there, we're going to put some more stuff in. But quite a bit more to be planted out still. And there you have it. That's it from a distance. To the sunset.